Well, there's the target demographic, and then there's the demographic that gets popular or popularizes the thing, and those are not always the same.
Star Wars was a shonen originally. The new Star Wars is Shoujo.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the After Work Anime Club podcast. I am your host, Luulu Soul, and today joining me is...
I am a sentient bag of flesh, and after a cup of coffee during this podcast, I will become Tsukasa Soul. It is a pleasure to meet you all.
Alright, that is one of the more unique intros that I've gotten so far, and I love it. Alright, so in my last YouTube video, I went into a topic that I called, I want to see a shonen-style anime with a female protagonist, and while I was getting ready for that, the question, what is a shonen anime, kept popping up. And you and I, we started getting into a conversation about it.
Yeah, and thankfully, I've done my research coming into this, so I watched your video. I really enjoyed it. It had a little bit of back and forth on some stuff, but realistically, you started the question, answered it a little bit, and then moved on into the video. And so you were like, hey, for the pushing up glasses individuals out in the world, actually, shonen is a demographic. You're wrong. You're also correct, but you're wrong and you know that.
Okay, so there was this whole thing going on about how the reason this got all twisted up to begin with is I didn't realize that shonen was a demographic because growing up here in the States, shonen represents a very specific style of show. Which is weird because it comes from a manga. Okay, how about you? Let's go. Define it for me. What is a shonen?
So, a shonen, yes, a demographic, whatever. But a shonen is essentially a type of show that young boys would like, but that is such a broad and meaningless conversations because there's no show out there that has race cars and wrestling and, military gunfights, Fortnite, candy. There's not a show that encapsulates everything that young boys like, and the Venn diagram of what young boys and young girls like exists. So does that mean that most shonen also appeals to young girls? Or are we just ignoring that and just saying, oh no, only kids, who are male presenting from the ages of 6 to 18 or 6 to 16 or whatever, that's the only people we care about? If that's the case, then, man, My Little Pony had a demographic, and I don't think we want to talk about who the demographic was.
Well, there's the target demographic, and then there's the demographic that gets popular or popularizes the thing, and those are not always the same. But I do see your point. I feel like, at least at this point, shonen and shoujo is like the anime world's equivalent of the pink and blue aisle in Walmart. At some point, I guess it did make sense for society, but at this point, you're right. The gendered lines are so blurred with who likes what for how many cookies that, is it really necessary as much anymore?
Right. And that's where we get into the conversation of words have meaning. And when we get into semantic arguments, it's better for everybody to be on the same line, the same level when we're defining things. So when somebody hears shonen anime, they have a mental image of what a shonen anime is. It's got battles, it's got camaraderie, it's got, goal-oriented things. And when you think shoujo, you're not thinking the epic multi-level universe-breaking fight scenes, but you are thinking a lot more, there's camaraderie, but more romance, more friendships, more slice of life kind of ideals. And that's not a guaranteed universal, but there's a lot more of what the genre has become outside of the demographic.
And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about mostly today, of the common things that you expect to see when someone is like, hey, here's this really cool new shonen anime, or here's this really cool new shoujo anime, because I do think that they both have a lot to bring to the table, especially once you take out the gender-specific portion of it.
Right. And this is where I'll go ahead and throw the spicy take onto the table right now. Star Wars was a shonen originally. These young boys who grow up to be the big bad and the big good, that is a shonen style movie. And when they get to the end, they either get the girl, they save the galaxy, the day is saved, whatever it is. The new Star Wars is Shoujo. And for whatever reason, they took the shonen template of Star Wars, added a female main character,
And then somewhere through it, we're like, we need a love story. You didn't.
But Star Wars had a love story.
Not for Luke.
I mean, it's one started.
Luke had kids off screen. That's how we got the remake or the new ones.
There was the kiss. That was totally a kiss.
Yeah, we called them siblings because that's how it makes it better in America. Remember, kids, you can't just be in a relationship. You have to be in a relationship with your cousin. Star Wars learned from Sailor Moon.
It's like the 90s anime censorship at its weakest.
But yeah, what ended up happening is they changed the genre of Star Wars from a shonen to a shoujo, and the core audience felt betrayed by it. And I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff. There's definitely a group within that realm that was like, ooh, black people, ooh, women.
Whoa, okay. We're getting a little bit off topic
here.
here.
I'm gonna hate on those people. All right, those people deserve to be hated on.
That's true.
But it was a genre change. And while they might not be able to articulate everything that's there, that seems to be one of the undercurrents of it, is the Star Wars that has existed for decades at that point changed, and they didn't understand the change outside of the main character is different, and it felt wrong. That's kind of what it came down to. It is a different genre.
I can't speak too confidently on this because I barely watched the original Star Wars movies, and I have not seen any of the new Star Wars movies, and I have this whole thing that I'm not going to talk confidently about something that I don't have the knowledge on, but I don't think it's fair to Shoujo to say that the new Star Wars movies is now Shoujo, because that seems pretty insulting to Shoujo from what I've heard about them.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a good shoujo to be a shoujo.
Okay, so what is a shoujo?
We kind of covered that. It's more...
We didn't, though. We vaguely, went...
Yeah.
This is a story about emotions, but so once something gets categorized, they're usually categorized because there have been enough patterns in at least the most popular versions of the thing to create an almost expectation of what you're going into, and that's how you get to break walls. So, for example, we know with the hero's journey that the main character is going to start out fairly weak and go on a coming-of-age, growing-up style where they learn who they are, and by the end of it, they are, quote, a grown-up, right?
Right.
So what are we expecting from, a shoujo anime?
You mentioned this in your video. The shoujo protagonist generally doesn't struggle in the same way or needs to get stronger and develop new techniques or anything. They kind of have their technique to start.
It's kind of usually the fighting aspects when it exists it's given to them in a kind of Deus Ex Machina kind of way, or somebody else does the fighting for them.
Right. In a very unflattering way to say it, they kind of have the boss bitch energy when it comes to the fights, but it's the other aspects of their life that they need work on. They need to be able to trust their friends more. Maybe they were socially isolated and they need to learn how to have friends or make friends. Maybe their family life is a thing. What is it? Cardcaptor Sakura. She doesn't have a mom, so she ends up cooking and doing stuff around the house to help out with her family.
Okay, whoa, hold up now. Sakura cannot cook.
No.
Toya, her brother, picks up a lot of the mothering roles that happens in that household.
Mm-hmm.
So just you
have a character who is definitely flawed when it comes to certain things, but to say she genuinely struggles in any of her capturing of the cards.
Yeah, not really.
It's not really the point of the show.
So I'd say with shoujo anime, usually even when you have more shoujo style battle anime, Cardcaptor Sakura, Sailor Moon, more recently I would say maybe Yona of the Dawn, which is a similar to Fushigi Yugi. Main character is some type of a chosen one that has to go around collecting all the pretty men who have the pretty powers. Very good. I didn't do the description justice there, but that's the vibe it gives off.
Is that the one with the twins?
I don't know.
Or is that Ayase no Sera's?
No, that's Ayase no Sera's.
Okay, so quick side tangent. I was dating a girl, and she kept wanting me to watch Sera's, and was adamant that it was this great anime. And at that point, I had just read like Alice 19th. I was like into Nana, and I was like, all right, I guess Sarah's might be okay. And I watched the first episode of this anime, and it gets to this big dramatic table reveal. Spoilers in case people want. You got like 5 seconds. They sit down, their grandfather's at one end, there's all these guys in suits like along the walls, and the two twins are there, and he slides this birthday gift box over to him, and I paused the anime and I looked at her and I went, and inside the box was a human hand, and they opened the box and it was a human hand.
Okay.
And I cannot watch it. I swear it was the most terrible train wreck of I was trying to be a little shit, but I called it, and I should not have been able to call it.
Two things about that. One, that was a terrible adaptation of a very good manga. I would not suggest the series anime to anybody, but I would suggest the manga if you like long-winded romance. Thing number two, Iwatase, the creator of Sarah's and Alice 19th, is absolutely brilliant in her short-form stories. If you want a manga volumes that span between like 3 to 6 volumes that has a nice short story that gets wrapped up into those volumes and tugs at your heartstrings, go with Iwatase. If you want a long form, will they, won't they, same plot every single time, why won't these volumes end? What the heck? Why aren't these characters just together anyway? And why isn't he a sentient creature? Go for her longer form stories. She really excels in her short form content. But
Did she write Friends?
she could have. But there's not enough supernatural craziness in Friends for that to happen.
You know, that's fair, but like the stories always took a dive when people got together. We're getting off topic.
This is what happens. This is a rambly podcast. It's fine. Some of this will stick in.
Excellent.
Some of this will be cut out. I'm not sure what'll be what. But the whole point is to have very natural flow of a conversation. But going back before we went on our Sarah's tangent, I feel like the point, even when you have the more battle style anime of shoujo, isn't the fighting, which was my critique in my YouTube video of I wanted to see a main character where the focus is the fighting. But with shoujo, that's not the point. The fighting might happen, it might be there, they might even be really cool scenes, but usually these shows are more about what you were saying, the everyday issues that come along while you're also trying to, be a warrior that protects the world.
Now, I want to say one of the issues that you had, and I was thinking about it quite a bit watching your video, when you say you want a female shonen protagonist, there are a couple of characters that pop out, but they're side characters in other shonen.
Yes.
Like the mentor for the Elric brothers in Full Metal Alchemist.
Oh, the housewife!
If she had her own series, she would be that female shonen protagonist. Even the Armstrong's sister, the general, who like takes over the ice area in Brotherhood.
She's just badass. I don't think I would watch an anime following her, but I would absolutely watch an anime following the teacher.
Seeing her like as a new recruit or like a junior officer learning how to become that officer. Oh, that would be, this is how I became, like the fucking like best officer or whatever in the military. You could have those things. You don't need the shonen protagonist to already be put together. You want them to grow and struggle.
So it would be the journey of how she became the badass ice queen that we see in the show. That would be really cool. Which brings me to another thought. Someone mentioned that what I'm looking for is Claymore. And I did look into Claymore as one of the representations of, hey, maybe this is what I'm looking for. It is a shonen anime / manga, and it does have a very strong female character who is the focus of the show. But the story follows everything through the eyes of the boy protagonist in the show, at least for the first, 4 or 5 episodes that I was watching. Mm-hmm. It seems to be telling her story through his eyes, which is funny, because that is often what will happen when you have a more battle-heavy shoujo anime. Again, like Fushigi Yugi, which is a story about a young girl who realizes that she's the priestess of Suzaku, which can grant people wishes, and she has to go and collect all of the members of the Zodiac or something. More recently, Yon of the Dawn, same premise. You have this female character that views the fight scenes through the eyes of the other characters around her in the show. I quite like this trope. I think this trope is a lot of fun, and I tend to identify most with these characters now that I am older. But I found it kind of funny that in this shonen manga, I found almost the equivalent of like it almost felt like a shoujo style anime with a male protagonist.
And I think one of the other things, if I can kind of dissect it a little bit more, there is a difference between the main character and the protagonist. And so we have shows like Fairy Tail, where it is definitely Lucy's story, but depending on who she's around, she's not the protagonist.
Right. They're, I don't think anybody actually knows. I don't even think the author themselves know who the actual protagonist of Fairy Tail is. It changes depending on the arc. But yeah, I think you're right. Lucy would be the main character because most of the things that happen in Fairy Tail, she's writing down in her journal.
Right. But then you have a different version of that, which is Inuyasha, where you have Kagome being the main character, but Inuyasha, for the most part, is the protagonist. It has a lot of fight scenes. Kagome eventually learns how to pick up a bow and use some like sacred arrows here and there, but like for the most part the fighting is relegated away from her, and her story is more of like a romance, a love triangle. Like they forget the jewel exists for like 100 episodes and do like the Naruto filler series. It was great. It wasn't great, but you know what, at the same time, Inuyasha was a shonen protagonist because Iron Reaver Soul Stealer barely worked in the first episode and it never worked again, and he would still do that in every single battle.
Which works because Inuyasha is a shonen. A lot of people think it's a shoujo. It's not. It's shonen.
But Kagome's not the protagonist in that.
I would actually argue, because we've had this conversation before and I don't think we've ever agreed on this, I would argue that Kagome is the protagonist, but that Inuyasha is the main character. Because, or maybe it's just because everyone views stories differently, but when I'm watching Inuyasha, I'm usually like rooting for Kagome. She is the character that I want to see grow. She does get a little stronger. She does more fighting than I remember, but it is also very distant. All of the big battles, you're going to see Inuyasha himself fighting, you're going to see Sango, you're going to see Moroku. But for the big emotional beats of the show, it's Kagome's struggle with her own sense of self. Who is she? Who is she compared to Kikyo once Kikyo shows up? Who is she when she falls in love with Inuyasha? Who is she in the past versus in the present with her family? Like, her entire storyline revolves around, like I said, sense of self. And you get a little bit of that with Inuyasha too, with the whole half-demon thing. But, like we mentioned earlier, the entire story is said through Kagome's eyes, so even the parts that belong to Inuyasha feel like they have more to do with, like, how Kagome feels about Inuyasha's plight. But then when the fighting comes, it's all about Inuyasha, all about his love story, all about him versus Naraku. Kagome's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna be back here, guys.
Yeah, but to say she's not the main character, what does the camera follow when Kagome's like, yo, fuck this shit, I'm out, and jumps in a well and goes home for an afternoon?
You're right, it does follow Kagome, so maybe this is just a situation of like a dual protagonist main character because, yeah, depending on the plot of the... So Kagome takes the shoujo aspects and Inuyasha takes the shonen aspects, and it's a combo anime, yeah!
I feel like the court of law would be sitting here going, all right, who has protagonist 51% of the time? You know, who's got primary custody of the protagonist title? And that, okay, yeah, you're the main character. Good job.
I think a better example of like protagonist versus main character would be Avatar: The Last Airbender. Because I will forever maintain that Aang is the main character of that show, but Zuko is the protagonist 100%. Like, at no point have I ever actually worried about whether or not Aang was going to defeat the Fire Lord. It was Aang's journey to defeating the Fire Lord. I was consistently curious and worried about whether or not Zuko was going to actually become redeemed, and then once he was redeemed, was he going to be able to stay there?
Also, that brings up another thing. For all the people who are like, hey, shonen is a demographic, it's not a genre. Yeah, that means Avatar's an anime. Fight me. Get in the comments.
I think at this point, when we have so much like manga, manhwa, webtoons, anime, American cartoons, like what was it? Arcane?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we can. I think that's an aged argument now.
Well, so that goes into a whole thing, and shoot, I'd love to share my opinion with the world on it.
Let's go.
Authentic doesn't mean anything. All right? There is no such thing as an authentic food or an authentic meal. So, in the realm of anime, there are, I would say, almost soil purists, right? Anime has to be some sort of cartoon or animation made on Japanese soil. But then you have the hands of the creator, which means that if it's an American person in Japan making anime, oh, that's not anime. You know, it has to be a Japanese person on Japanese soil. That's what an anime is made of. You're wrong. That's not how any of that works. There's no inherent anime blood that runs through a Japanese person that makes them the only people who can make it, right? This isn't the Champagne region of France of anime. The entire argument of it has to be a certain soil or it has to be a certain creator or you've had to have studied it for a certain thing. When somebody looks at anime and says, oh, this is an anime style, you understand what they're saying. If a thing is made in traditional elements of what generates an anime, that makes sense. But to say it is an authentic anime is well beyond the realm.
Okay, so we're actually wrapping back around to part of our original topic. What does make an anime style? What is it about the word anime that when we watch a TV show and we go, yes, this is an anime? Because we've run into situations where there appears to be a difference between, like, this is what I think of when I think of an anime, and this is, like, an animation.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, there is no difference. Anime is cartoons. But but if I say cartoon, I have a very different image in my head than when I say anime.
I would say the quality of graphics lends really, really well into that conversation. Cartoons tend to have a much more stylized, lower kind of animation to them. They can be a little bit more choppy, they can be a little bit more flat. Like, on the extreme of that, I think of, like, South Park, where it literally started off with, like, cutouts of the characters moving around. That's a cartoon.
It also makes me think of Shin-Chan.
Yeah.
Which is an anime. Very
Shin-Chan
popular.
is made in an American cartoon style.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's kind of what I'm... Yeah, because if I were to have seen Shin-Chan on TV as a kid, thank goodness I didn't because I'm not a fan, but if I were to have, I would have thought it falled much more under the realm of, like, American-style cartoons.
Right. And I think one of the other things, when people hear cartoon, they immediately think this is for children, which a lot of people in America think anime is for children anyway, which let's not even get into that. But Hamtaro, I want to say, blends a lot of things. So Hamtaro is definitely an anime. It's a little bit more polished, it's a little bit more, like, well designed, there's a little bit more depth. It is aimed at a younger audience, but then to look at something also aimed at a younger audience, I'm not going to say Cocomelon is an anime.
Please don't.
I'm going to say that's probably a cartoon.
I'm going to say Cocomelon is a travesty.
Well, yes, but do you know how much merch there is out there for it?
And you know, for as much as I say it, put on your shoes lives rent-free in my head. It is worse than Baby Shark. I'm saying it right now. Worse than Baby Shark. It's stuck in my head again now.
Good job. You did it.
But yeah, I would... Cocomelon, it's its own thing. It is its own thing. But going back to Hamtaro, yeah, Hamtaro does have a lot of things that I think of when I think of anime. I think of the big expressive eyes. It used to have, like, this iconic sweat drop, which is like this big water or tear drop that will just appear on a character's heads. I don't think it happens quite as much anymore, but there was a lot of tells that kind of categorized something as an anime style for me, at least growing up. And that is the sweat drops, the big expressive eyes, the big expressive facial expressions. What was it? The falling? Where they would just instantly, like, just crash down into the ground when they were caught off guard. Mm-hmm. That was a big one.
I don't know about the whole expressive eyes things, because wasn't that taken from, like, OG Disney?
Originally, kind of. So, in the beginning of the animation frontier, America...
I just saw, like, a rainbow come across. Like, the more you know, in the beginning,
I watched a
there
YouTube
wasn't
video on this
anime.
Well, when animation was just starting out, back when we had like, I think we had like Mickey Mouse, the one that's public domain now. Japan and America actually kept just borrowing from each other. In fact, like the amount of times that American and Japanese animation has just blended together because they keep taking things from each other is fairly big. So the big anime eyes came from, you're right, in the American animation style. But then American cartoon styles actually started using much smaller eyes, which you can see it more in, I want to say, like Looney Tunes with like Bugs Bunny. And what are some really popular ones? Ren and Stimpy. And then on the opposite end, you have like Astro Boy, Speed Racer, Gundam Wing. This is a little beyond me, so I can't even date myself here. This is just things I was old when I was growing up. But in the anime realm, in the Japanese animation, they started just over exaggerating the eyes more and more and more until it became its own thing unique to anime.
I'm thinking, what was it? The 90s uwu phase of anime?
Yeah, that's
God.
where, look, that's where I was cultivated, is the late 90s, early 2000s, and that's where a lot of the tropes that I'm talking about came from. Though I'm actually really curious, because if you look at a lot of anime nowadays, again, there has been this really big blending here lately of like manhwa and manhwa. I'm pronouncing both of those wrong, but one is Korean comics and one is Chinese comics. They've both started becoming adapted into, quote, anime. Webtoons have been starting to be adapted into anime. So you have a lot of different art styles that are blending together. So maybe a lot of the tropes that I think of now aren't even really tropes anymore. Mm-hmm. And we don't go there. Don't look up Clannad.
Oh yeah,
don't do that.
Yeah,
but yeah, the big eyes.
Oh yeah, Clannad was peak uwu eye anime. Her head is like 60% eyes.
Like back then, even when you had your really serious anime, the eyes took up most of the face. Which actually
Oh no, that's not 90s. Clannad was 2007.
I say 90s as if the 90s spanned like multiple decades.
So it's probably 2000s anime then. Let me asterisk that one. Fair. We got peak uwu in the 2000s.
But here's a good question, because I vaguely remember, there is no actual confirmation on this because it's something that I vaguely remember. At some point, someone did an interview with Hayao Miyazaki, and he said that what he made wasn't anime. I've always looked at Studio Ghibli movies as like the Disney of Japan, which is why they get compared so often. But I'm curious, would Hayao Miyazaki's films fit into those tropes I was talking about of, quote, this is what I think of when I think of anime?
Right.
Because they don't generally have the sweat drops. They do have beautiful expressions on their faces, but the eyes themselves don't tend to be super large. So especially for like when like Kiki's Delivery Service, Princess Mononoke, when those things were coming out, they didn't fit the tropes. But I would still consider Miyazaki movies anime. So
from a very cursory scrub, his comments stem from the fact that he believes that a lot of anime are just about escapism from reality, whereas Miyazaki tries to put more heart and soul into his depictions of people in his movies.
And a lot of his movies do seem like the main character is looking for escapism and has to come back to reality.
They have more grounding when it comes to stuff. Like, things don't just work out. There's still struggles even in, like, the moment of triumph.
One of the biggest things I can think of is Spirited Away, which is the first time I experienced a main character that I did not like at first. I was not a fan of this whiny little bratty child that did not listen to her parents. Her parents weren't great either, but oh my goodness, could she whine. But then throughout the movie, she grows up. She becomes more confident in herself. She learns how to stand strong instead of whining. And when she gets back home at the end of the movie, none of her circumstances have changed, but she has changed.
Right. It's coming of age tale. And I mean, I'd have to do more research into it. Again, a 5-second Google search should not make me the expert on anything that I'm
What?
about
But
to
that's
say.
exactly how that works.
No, no, no. I'm gonna disclaimer the hell out of that. But Miyazaki's entire thought is kind of a sentiment that I have seen resound inside of the anime community, which is, God, there's a lot of like self-insert author, wish fulfillment, power fantasy animes coming out, and they're all the same and nothing stands out. And when we move on to the next season of anime, we forgot the titles of the stuff that we watched because it's so non like impactful at the end of the day. The animation might be pretty, like the characters might have been okay, the story might have been all right, but it doesn't leave a lasting thing.
There has been this really weird combination I've noticed within the last few seasons of anime, at least. This weird combination of power and cozy anime. And it's usually an isekai. It's where you've got the main character is usually an adult, which I do quite like. I like seeing more adults in anime. But the main character is an adult. They have become isekai'd due to some form of overwork or truck or just bad living situations. And when they arrive in the new world, they have this seemingly mundane power that is just makes them untouchable. There have been more than one where that main power is just the ability to order off of Amazon instantly. And they live a fairly uneventful, peaceful life in insert Fantasyland here using that superpower that they gained by becoming basically burnt out from work.
And I think that kind of misses the appeal of like the OG Shonen or even some things like, One Piece right now, where we relate to the struggle. We relate to the like clawing forward, getting up after we get knocked down. A lot of these other animes, they're power fantasies. Oh, here's the 5-minute montage of this character struggling in life. Now the rest of this 26 episode anime is just going to be about how great they are, how many, things they get, all of these powers that they have, all of this land that they conquered. There's no more struggle.
This was my issue when I was watching Solo Leveling. Now, I will caveat this. Caveat, is that the right word? I don't care. I will caveat this by saying I have heard there is more depth to the story in the manhwa that got cut out for the anime. So if you are a manhwa follower, I'm not talking about it. I'm not. We're talking about the anime here. But when I was watching Solo Leveling, while it had a super high production value, the characters themselves are decently badass. They've definitely got aura, so to speak. But the main character does not struggle. He just really, really does. He like gets this. One of the biggest things is like one of the first trials he faces. He ends up getting this poison potion thing, right? It's like you get a lot of bonuses, I think it is, but you poison yourself while doing it. And so he's like, oh, I'm just going to tuck this away. Seems big bad, but I don't want to throw it away. And then like a little bit later, like maybe 2 or 3 episodes max, he gets poisoned and nothing happens. And he realizes he can't drink alcohol anymore because his body automatically just heals the poison because he magically gets this special ability that takes away poison. And so he's like, haha, now I can take this special drink because it won't actually affect me negatively at all in any way, shape, or form because I now have this special skill. And it was done just like he needed it at that time. He took the potion, he got stronger, no after effects. Like, I remember when the main character had to do the big, like, power-up move, and then they're asleep for the next week, sometimes eating while asleep, because it took so much out of them, and that is not present in Solo Leveling. Ever. Oh, yes, the anime poison dragon thing.
Is that what Solo Leveling was? I thought there was another one. Yeah, I don't want to get hurt, so I put all my... I maxed out my defense.
Oh, wait, no, that is Boof.
Yeah, but that one, they basically fight a poison dragon so long and keep getting cured and healed that they build the resilience to poison. It's not just unlocked automatically and given to them. But one of the, again, back to the whole, the power fantasies of modern anime feels almost like we're back in the OG console wars for like Nintendo and PlayStation and Xbox. It's like, who can put the most graphics into it? Who can put the most special effects and, fancy moves and everything? We've lost the sustenance. We're not making good games. We're just making graphically impressive monstrosities that have no heart, no soul. And I think that's what Miyazaki was getting at, is modern anime kind of misses the point of what people related to things on. Now it's no longer about relating. It's about having, the biggest explosion, or about, oh, this, water breathing style is going to put us on the map. So everything needs to be graphically impressive. And then when you actually take a step back and you look at it, you're like, oh, the story was mid.
Yeah, but he made that comment, like, I think back in, like, peak anime time frame.
Oh, I don't think we're out of peak anime. I think we're still going hard.
I mean, like the back when like Neon Genesis was still airing, I think is when he made the comment. Like, it has been quite a while, but I do agree with what you're saying, which is why when an anime like Kaiju number 8 hits the field, I get so excited. Because Kaiju number 8 takes those feelings of I'm an overworked adult, and they went, what happens if we have a main character who has been working towards a goal and has been failing, and now they're in their 30s and they're about to give up, and something grants them the opportunity to finally go after their goals, but it's still going to be a struggle. And that's what Kaiju number 8 is. It is the traditional shonen style coming of age story. It's watching Goku for the first time, or watching Yusuke for the first time, except he's my age. I'm actually watching a protagonist that's around my age get to go on this shonen style adventure. It's like if Neon Genesis and My Hero Academia did the fusion dance, but Deco never got All Might's powers until he was in his 30s. That's what Kaiju number 8 is.
I'm trying to think of a single shoujo anime that would treat their main character as rough as Yu Yu Hakusho. Yu Yu Hakusho treated Yusuke.
Oh, man.
Because, man, in like the first couple of episodes, he gets basically beat on by his principal, gets hit by a car, shows up to his first day as a police detective, gets absolutely bodied by a demon. Like,
oh, I know of one. Kotora-san.
Yeah, that was supposed to be a comedy.
I just hurt you a little inside.
Yeah, now, actually.
Just watch episode 1, and then watch episode 2 to feel better.
That is an anime that has a fucking ticking time bomb of PTSD.
But that is something that I do feel is missing, even when we have, like, from what I was looking for, I'm like, hey, I want to show an anime female protagonist, was when you do have the female characters of the battle anime, they don't get rough and tumbled. They don't get into physical altercations. And I'm not saying that I like violence, but sometimes when you have this badass, like, Firefly style main character that will punch a guy, and sometimes I want that character that will punch a guy to be a female, and when that happens, I'd like them to also be the main character. And it's like, you can't have all three. It's like female, badass, main character, choose two.
Yeah, I can see that.
But the counter of that seems to be male character, emotional journey, main character, choose two. It is very rare that you see a male main character that gets to go through the type of journey that female protagonists go through in a lot of shoujo manga. And I would like to see that too. I guess I just want to see more gendered characters blending the lines of what can or cannot be a, quote, main character. Though we have come a long way, and that now we do, like you mentioned earlier, we do keep seeing a lot of side characters or supporting cast characters that are allowed to go on these more gender blurred style journeys and stuff.
And see, you got me wondering. I don't know if Dot Hack is considered to be a shonen or not.
I think I looked it up. I think it's seinen.
Is it seinen?
Or it might not have a category at all because it wasn't a manga first.
Yeah, it might have predated because they just created the anime on it.
Usually, if it wasn't a manga first, because Shonen and Shoujo are attached to Shonen Jump and I think Shoujo Beat originally, which is where the names came from. They are manga that are turned into anime.
Oh, that throws an entire wrench into a lot of people's perceptions then, because what are light novels if they weren't a manga first?
Exactly, like a lot of light novels don't have that, because going back to what I eventually found out was, like, the reason it's a demographic is it, like, the two, like, categories to make something a shonen or a shoujo is it has to be targeted towards a certain age range, a certain gender, and it has to show up in these two comics.
Yeah, but the reason I go .hack, so one, that's where the Tsukasa and Tsukasa soul comes from, in addition to the soul part. But it is a very character-driven, like, slow-paced narrative story. And I think it's phenomenal. It was one of my favorite animes. It's still probably my favorite anime to date. But it has a lot of the more emotional kind of relationship-based stories. There's not a lot of fighting in it. And if you've ever played an MMO, .hack is kind of the MMO vibe. It's a bunch of people who log on and stand around and talk and then do a dungeon and then log off for the night. Like, it's very accurate to what MMOs were.
I think we're going to be kind of done here for today's. If you'd like to get Tsukasa back in here, get in the comments and let us know.
And if you had any critique, again, words mean things. So when we're saying stuff, we might not be 100% accurate. So if you have a different definition, you want to go ahead and throw it, get in the comments. All right? Tell us we're wrong. I'll tell you you're wrong. We'll have a very nice, heated, but respectful conversation. I might put emojis in there because I think that's how the new generation communicates, right?
No, that's how our generation communicated, and then emojis started getting cool, and I don't even know
No,
what's
we used
happening
acronyms. I remember, like,
XD face.
No. Somebody was like, we had a death in the family, and my grandma texted, "Hey, I'm sorry to hear about that, LOL," and she thought it meant lots of love. So, no, we did shorthand.
Well, we did that too. That was the original text speak, but I'm talking about, like, the XD face, the two little triangles,
just
the kitty
emote,
cat face,
like emojis. You know, the Emoji Movie came out. It was all about, like,
the emotes
Gen Z.
are the bastardization of what we did as kids. I still actually type XD. Anyway, we're gonna go now. Thanks for listening. Bye. You gotta say bye. That's not saying bye.